Good afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here, taking a look at your tropical update for September 23rd of 2019. And just like I left you folks last week, this week, hey, guess what? Hey, so still got a lot going on. Of course, as always, brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters and Remodeling. I stand before you in front of the peak of hurricane season to highlight something, well, that we're on the downward slope. But we're not sloping as hard as you get toward the end of September and into October. And matter of fact, as we head through, you get a pretty sharp drop and then an uptick again. And generally, that has to do with the MJO as it goes sliding around the globe. Of course, we did pick up one more name this afternoon or earlier this morning. Lorenzo is now a tropical storm. That was tropical depression number 13 last night, if you're keeping score at home. Next one is going to be Melissa, and then I'm personally looking forward to Nestor. Hope we never have to use it, but and then some of these names: Olga, Rebecca with a K, Sebastian. Some of these names, Van, they don't incite a lot of fear. You know, I mean, heaven forbid it's a nasty storm, and I don't know. I really hope you folks take Hurricane Van, if we ever get there, seriously. I just can understand if you hear that and you kind of go, it sounds like a fullback. We've got a little something rolling through parts of the Gulf of Mexico right now. That's what's left of that little wave that we were talking about last week that had that kind of 10% chance. The development was on the south side of Jamaica that I was talking about needing to keep tabs on over about the next week. Well, there it is, and not much to it anymore. It got eaten up pretty good by some shear. We got Jerry up here, Karen down there. A little bit of shearing action happening in the middle of the Atlantic, and then as we slide our way over just off the coast of Africa, we've got Lorenzo, and then another wave blossoming back up behind it right in here, and then another wave right back in behind it. So we're not done with tropical waves once we get through Lorenzo. Again, things staying reasonably active due to where the MJO is currently set up. But let's start things off with good old Jerry out here. A tropical storm going to lift off and eventually back off to the northeast, winded to 65 miles an hour right now, gusting to 75. Pressure down to 991, and it's currently going north-northwest at about 5 to 10 miles an hour. Again, still going to be a tropical storm as it kicks off to the northeast. The interesting part about this, and it's not going to let me move the screen, is it? As I say, the interesting part about this, it gets out to the end, back in behind our banner here, is it actually curlicues back off to the south, and we'll talk more about that here in a hot second. We've got Karen here, which is going to lift off to the north. Latest on this, now back down to a tropical depression, wind at 35 miles an hour, gusting to 45. This thing is ugly currently. It is just beaten up down here. A lot of times in the Caribbean, things have a difficult time staying organized. This is going to lift across parts of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, is likely a tropical depression before lifting to the north and becoming a tropical storm again. This one ends up in the same place that Jerry's in right now, hooking back off to the west and to southwest. And we'll talk about that more in a couple of seconds as well. And then Lorenzo out here, anticipated to be a tropical storm, a Category 1 hurricane, and then a 2. I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a run at a 3 or maybe even a 4 out here before it dies. It's going to hook off to the north and likely stay out to sea and bother almost nobody. A wind at 45, gusting to 60 right now, moving to the west at about 16 miles an hour. So coming off the African coast, this thing actually looks a whole lot healthier than the other two. Let's go back. We can take a look at Karen down here. Ugly. And we can take a look at Jerry here. Jerry's about as one-sided as you can get a tropical system, although it does look like it's trying to wrap itself up with some more convection. It's getting eaten up by a little bit of shear. And then again, Karen just looks ugly. This thing, Lorenzo, is actually looking pretty good out here in the open Atlantic. All right, so as we head through the next little bit, we've got this little guy to worry about, a 10 to 20% chance of development, a little bit closer to home, but it's going to be sliding its way toward Mexico and should stay away from the United States. So back over to the spaghetti plots. Jerry moving across Bermuda as we head through Wednesday at 5 o'clock. But notice how some of these take it pretty far and others take it not far at all. The spread between the models here on Jerry, and again, this is why following the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center is so important when you're making plans and stuff. But the spread in the modeling is pretty incredible. I mean, some of these just kind of drifted around Bermuda for a while, even just off to the south, all the way through Friday, while others have it, you know, full bore toward Europe. It does make one think and wonder, doesn't it? Well, let's see what's going on with Karen down here. Karen lifts off to the north at a pretty decent clip through Thursday, and then kind of hangs up, and the models are kind of all over the place. We got the UK Met's up here around Bermuda. Some of the members of the GFS are down here near Puerto Rico still. The GFS actually has it go up, pull a U-turn, and now it's headed back off to the west. Now, well, what the heck's going on? All right, well, let's take a peek. Here's Jerry, and there's Karen. So we've got our J and our K here, and then Lorenzo's back out here. Some dry air just off to the northeast of Jerry, some dry air back off to the west of Jerry, and into the Gulf of Mexico. Here's that 10%, 10 to 20% chance of development here just near the Bay of Campeche in the Yucatan. Let's set some things into motion, shall we? Here we go through Tuesday and Wednesday and into Thursday and Friday morning. So late Thursday and into Friday. There's Jerry, there's Karen, there's Lorenzo. We've got some dry air in here, some dry air back into the Gulf of Mexico. This little piece of chunk of something actually ends up getting split off where all that shear is happening right now on the kind of near the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It's actually cutting across parts of the Caribbean. It's part of the reason that Karen's going to push off to the north and why Jerry continues to move off to the northeast here. But a little chunk of this is going to break off and try and drift back to the west on the south side of a ridge of high pressure. Underneath that ridge of high pressure is some reasonably dry air, and that actually shows up here in our 700 millibar moisture area. That's nice and dry in there. Your 850 vorticity, those are the warm colors, the little red shaded areas. Let's set things into motion. Well, what happens when you get a ridge of high pressure? Stuff goes around it clockwise, right? Well, big ridge of high pressure, guess what? Things pull the brakes, and here comes Karen back toward the Bahamas. Jerry's right in behind it. Again, these are all both on the south side of a ridge of high pressure. There's your dry air. Not being affected by said ridge is Lorenzo down here, which continues to hightail off to the north. So here's what the European says through Monday, the end of September. This becomes kind of interesting because we don't know, as meteorologists yet, how strong this ridge is going to be. Is it going to be strong enough to bounce Jerry, as you see here, back off to the south and thus bounce Karen back off to the south and back to the west? Or is Jerry going to do enough to weaken the ridge to the point where Jerry gets through and moves off to the northeast? That opens the door for Karen to slide on through and off to the northeast. We don't know. I wish we knew. I wish I could tell you, oh, I know. I'm going to stick my flag in the ground and I'm going to make a forecast. But that doesn't do anybody any good because I don't know. I'll be honest, completely transparent. I don't know. So this is what we're going to watch the next couple of days. There are a lot of variables that go into this and a lot of outcomes that come from those variables. That's why, if we go back here real quick, that's why when you see Jerry here, we got some of these things, these little lines, they're not even moving through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and some of these things are going full bore. The same reason with Karen. Karen's lifting off to the north and then kind of stalls out here, and some of them have it continuing to go to the north, others taking it back off to the west. The European, this is what we call a deterministic model. It's just one model. You put some numbers in, you get some numbers out. Take both of these things to the north. Here comes your ridge of high pressure, pokes its nose in, says, and back they come to the west. Then the question becomes, how far back to the west is the ridge? Does it go all the way to Texas? Does it stop at Florida? Is there a weakness in the Bahamas? So this can go back to the north and Jerry can go back to the north? We just don't know yet, unfortunately. What we do know right now is that it is very important that you keep tabs on the forecast if you're living in the Gulf of, along the Gulf of Mexico, along the East Coast, or in the Gulf of Mexico, or in the East Coast, either one. But if you live anywhere from Brownsville, Texas, all the way around to Norfolk, Virginia, along the coast or within, 100 miles of the coast, it is very important that you pay attention to the forecast in the coming days. Maybe not necessarily for your specific local forecast, but to keep tabs on what's happening in the tropics and what's happening with Jerry and Karen out there, as well as Lorenzo. You never know. If that big ridge slides far enough to the east, it may catch Lorenzo and bounce that thing back off to the west, too. Highly unlikely. But we've seen weirder things over the years, for sure. So there's a look at your tropical update. A lot going on. Brought to you by the good folks at Pine Belt Gutters for September 23rd of 2019.